Hey guys, it's Sam, and last year I uploaded the video 5 mistakes Copic artists make, or just any general alcohol-based markers. You guys really loved that video, like really. Thank you guys so much for all the likes and sharing that video around. That was just awesome. So since you guys liked the video so much, here's another one. This is 5 more mistakes that Copic or other alcohol-based markers artists make. 5 more mistakes Copic artists make. Yeah. And if you haven't seen the last one, definitely go check it out. Link is in the description. So number 1, or number 6 if we're continuing off from the last video, is that Copics are not lightfast. Not a lot of artists, especially beginner ones new to just art in general in the mediums, don't really think about lightfast or never really have heard of lightfast before, but it's actually really important. So all traditional mediums have a variable level of lightfastness. And what that means is basically how well the medium handles sunlight. So when the medium, or in this case the Copic markers, are exposed to light, they're going to fade over time. So this might not be a big deal for everybody, but if you want to hang up your artwork, or if you're selling your artwork, or if you're doing commissions, then longevity is probably something you want to think about. Now this isn't just Copic markers, actually quite a few alcohol-based markers, if not all of them, I kind of can't remember off the top of my head, do not have lightfastness. Lightfastness. Try saying that 10 times fast. Copics were not designed for serious work to be kept indefinitely. Copics were meant as a cheap tool, and I know they're not cheap, but you know, supply demand sort of thing. But anyway, they were originally meant for like graphic designers or fashion or mangakas, comic artists, basically things that were supposed to be scanned or photographed and saved for later. They're not designed to be hung up or displayed or anything. I actually found this amazing blog post, I'll link it down in the description. I really recommend you check it out. This artist not only tested out Copic markers and how they fade, and actually some fade with indoor light, but a whole bunch of other mediums. Definitely give it a look-see. They go into a whole bunch of detail. This person put a lot of work into it. So if you're uncertain about your own art supplies, be they markers or something else, definitely look into it, either Google searching, seeing if somebody else has already done it for you, or if the company has officially stated it like Copic does, or test it out yourself and test all of them, because different colors are going to react differently when exposed to the sunlight. Number 2, or number 7. Opening both caps of the markers. This one isn't really a mistake, more just kind of like a tip I wish I would have known several years ago. So I don't know how many of you guys have experienced this, but I experience it pretty often. So you're excited about this piece, you're working really hard on it, you go to open your next marker, and oh my god, there's just this giant blob that's now all over your paper. What? Basically, there's a buildup of pressure in the marker, and all of the ink kind of just pools out and just bleeds everywhere, and it is awful. So to fix that, you want to open both caps of the marker and just kind of let it breathe for a second, and then you're typically good to go to put the caps back on. This could happen due to improper storage or long periods of non-use. You just want to make sure your markers are like stored away from the sun, away from heat, just room temperature, horizontal if possible, and you might still end up having the buildup anyway, but it's just take off both caps and you're good. You can often spot the buildup before it happens. The markers tend to like look really wet, and you can kind of just see some of the ink kind of spilling out already. So if you see that happening, just no big deal, turn it over, undo the cap, give it a second to kind of seep back in, and it's all good. Tip number 3, buying new markers instead of buying refills. One of the reasons Copic is actually probably the cheapest marker you're going to get, and I know that sounds kind of silly saying that when they retail for like $8, but you shouldn't buy at full price anyway, you should be using coupons or buying online. But anyway, one of the reasons why Copic is actually one of the cheapest on the market right now is because they offer refills. Copic refills are basically just the ink, and you can use them to refill your marker. So if your marker dries out, runs out of ink, you don't need to buy a new one. You can just buy the refill for it. And these refills can fill your marker, I think it's like 5 to 7 plus times depending on how you fill it up. And these refills are just about the same price as an actual marker. So assuming you bought them both at full price, you're essentially paying just about $2, $1 to $2 for a single Copic marker because you refill it over time. But trust me, buy them online. Paying $8 for these markers that aren't even Lightfast, not worth it. So unless your marker is like insanely dead beyond repair because Copic sells refills and they also sell new nibs, you basically don't need to buy a new marker. An exception to that is if you're really unlucky like me and you end up with a busted R39 marker. For longtime followers on my Twitter, y'all were there for the bloody massacre of the nib change and refill. Oh my god. But my R39 for some reason has like this goopy, messed up thing on the nibs, and no amount of nib replacement or refilling has done anything to fix it, so in this case I pretty much have to buy a new marker. But other than that, you should be good to go. I wish I knew what caused it though, but it's thus far only been the one marker. Tip number 4, not 8, thinking you can't mix brands. I don't know how common this mindset is, but I pretty much see artists strictly sticking to one brand anyway, which is why I wanted to mention it. Alcohol-based markers are alcohol-based markers, regardless of what the name is on the label. Some brands might have colors, others don't. Some brands you might find you actually like working with better because they're all a little bit different in their own way, especially if you can't work out the investment for Copics because $8 retail. But again, don't buy retail, then you can just build up your marker collection with a whole bunch of different brands. But again, keep in mind they all kind of act a little bit differently, so it's good to play around with them just to make sure you get familiar with how each one works. If you want some markers but can't flesh out the money for Copics, I've actually reviewed an alternative called Studio Series. I'll link that in the description if you'd like to check it out. And if you guys would like me to review more brands, you can help me out by supporting me via Ko-Fi or on Patreon. The links will be in the description. As a bonus cheap alternative to Copics, some markers actually might work out with the Copic refill, though just to be warned, I haven't personally tried it myself. But if you guys have ever tried Copic refills with a different brand, let me know how that worked out. Figured I'd toss that idea out there because I'd like to try it eventually. And lastly, number 5, and technically number 10, if we're including my last video on this. Not utilizing multimedia. So pure Copic pieces can be amazing and beautiful and fantastic, but, you know, there are some limitations with the markers, and you can also get really cool effects using other stuff with them. I've seen people use watercolor or colored pencil is probably the two most common, but you could also scan the artwork and then do some digital stuff on top of that too. This works really well if you don't have a lot of color options or if you're looking for a specific texture. And Copic markers, while they are really nice and you have that brush tip that can get some pretty good detail, for those of us who like to work small, you're gonna have some detail limitations. So using things like colored pencils, which have a much finer tip, can make getting in those little details a lot easier. Also, if you're a colored pencil artist and you want to try something different, or if you don't want to use things like alcohol or mineral spirits, then I recommend trying Copic markers or just markers in general as a base. Really helps fill in the whites of the paper and saves you a lot of coloring time to get that base down. But of course, not Lightfast, so there's that issue. But hey, if you're just doing a piece for fun or you're just gonna scan it or whatever later, then go for it. Just be sure to test the different mediums out together to get a feel for them, how they work, how they interact, and the different papers that you might be using, because art media reacts and behaves a little bit differently on different papers, so it's good to test all this stuff out first before you do any sort of full big finished project thing. That's just advice in general, not just this. And that's pretty much all I got for you. Those are my 5 more mistakes. Well, it's 10 now because I have 2 videos. So those are my 10 mistakes, and if you haven't seen the previous video, go check it out. I have actually a whole 5 mistakes playlist. You can check the link out in the description. I go over digital art and just art in general, not just any sort of specific media. If you've made any of these mistakes or other mistakes and just want to story time, you can go ahead and do that in the comments down below. Every mistake I list in all of these 5 mistakes video, I've made myself, so, you know, no need to feel bad. We're all learning here, okay? That's the important part. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you'd like to see more tutorial videos from me, you can subscribe and check me out on Patreon, or Ko-Fi, or Coffee. I don't know how you pronounce it. But all the links will be in the description. So hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks so much for watching! Bye!